many people who are totally against that because it's not what we did in the early church, and I get that.
Three-legged stool.
Yep,
Three-legged
that's
stool.
right, that's right. And I get that, and there are strong arguments in both directions. But I think it plays into that corporate ladder thing, and that's one way that I think we can change that. Okay? Good? Charlie?
Okay, I'm from the Washington D.C. area, and they had
I'm sorry.
They had a. That's pretty
Speaking from Balmer,
I can go ahead and get my Arizona hat, put it on.
yes, sir, go ahead.
No, and you know, I'm Washington D.C. area, pretty close to Baltimore, but the better side of the river. Okay.
Oh,
You really
You
do.
started out like
I started.
You're outnumbered.
Here before
There are two
lightning
of us here
strikes.
from Baltimore.
Okay,
Oh
Charlie.
no, there's another one from DC, so Montgomery
So-
County.
Ask your question.
Yes, sir.
I forgot.
We'll come back to it. All right, somebody read for us the ministry of a bishop on page 855 at the bottom. What is the ministry of a bishop?
The ministry of a bishop is to represent Christ in his church, particularly as apostle, chief priest, and pastor of a diocese. They guard the faith, unity, and discipline of the whole church, proclaim the word of God, act in Christ's name for the reconciliation of the world, and the building up of the church, and to ordain others to continue Christ's ministry.
Okay. So
Wow.
the job description is very specific. It's those things. Notice it doesn't say administrator, chief administrator. It doesn't say any of that. But you know what? That's what bishops spend most of their time doing. The bishop is the chief pastor, not a hierarchical head, and that's very important to us. But the bishop is who the priest represents in each church. So everything that I do in the church is representative of the bishop. The priest's role came out of the bishop's role. The only reason we have priests is because we can't have a bishop everywhere. So that's what I do. The bishop is given no authority in our church without being advised by the standing committee. The standing committee is like the vestry at the local level. We have a group of people, half of which are priests, half of which are lay people, and the bishop is not allowed to make any decision on her own without the standing committee being involved in it. Okay? The standing committee is elected at diocesan convention, and it's that half and half break. The bishop has responsibility to admonish, suspend, or remove a presbyter or a deacon, but only after being advised to do so by the standing committee. Okay? So that's important stuff. So bishops cannot, in theory, yes, do that. Okay? If a clergy does something terrible, in our canons we have this thing called Title 4 that outlines all of those things that we could do wrong, moral things, ethical things, etc., etc. Then a clergy is presented with these charges, and a presentment can only be submitted by the standing committee. A bishop cannot do that. So it is so different than other churches in that way. Okay? Priests are representatives of the bishops in individual churches. A rector or a vicar, and I'm going to explain that in just a moment, has the authority for and responsibility for the conduct of worship, the spiritual jurisdiction of the parish, as a teacher, all of which is subject to the presiding bishop, the canons of the church, and the pastoral direction of the bishop. Okay? So in theory, according to the canons, I have responsibility for worship here and for the spiritual jurisdiction of the parish. I will suggest that any priest who does that is crazy. We have our own liturgy committee here, so whereas it's my responsibility in the end, I share that with lay people, and everything is kind of set up that way, all right? So, rector, vicar. So the priest in charge, and I've come to just calling myself here at other events, priest in charge, and I say that because nobody that's Episcopalian, not Episcopalian, doesn't know what a rector is or a vicar.
Right.
So I've just come to calling it that. I'm trying really hard to not use all that language, but anyway, a rector is the priest in charge of a parish. And the parish is defined as a church that is pulling its own way financially. Okay? A vicar is the priest in charge of a mission congregation.
Okay.
And a mission congregation is defined as a church that's being supported partially by the diocese. Okay? Now that's supposedly the way it is. In the Diocese of Utah, every single church is supported by the diocese a little bit.
I think there's one incorporated church.
Yep.
I don't remember where it is, but it's in Salt Lake.
Yep. I can't remember which one. Is it St. Paul's?
Yes.
I think it is St. Paul's. Yeah. Anyway, so that's how it works.
If they get a grant or something from the diocese or a loan, is that the same thing?
No, that doesn't count. Now, thanks for bringing that up. No, that doesn't count. Okay? So that's rector and vicar. Otherwise, they're the same thing. All right? All right. So at the parish church level, let's start with a parish church. Church membership is defined by baptism. Okay? That's what makes you a member. People come to me all the time and say, how do I join? Well, you officially join when the bishop lays hands on you. Okay? And we're going to do that. But actually, church membership is counted by baptism. The church's role is to welcome and nurture, not to create barriers. So we try to keep those things as open as we can. So a communicant, let's see, how should I do this? So baptized people are members. To be a communicant in good standing in the church, here's the legalese stuff. You have to go to communion 3 times a year, and you have to be a giver of record. Okay? So if you're going to run for vestry or some office in the church, those are the two things you have to do. That's it. Okay? All right. So the actual governing is left up to individual dioceses, but typically a parish church has an annual meeting. They elect a vestry. The people elect a vestry. The vestry takes responsibility for finances and property. In this parish, we go further than that. The vestry has many more things. And we have something called a senior warden and a junior warden. Okay? The junior warden is sometimes referred to as the warden of the people. You elect the junior warden. The junior warden is traditionally responsible for the property because the vestry is. So right now, our past junior warden was Bill Moore. Some of you know Bill. He did some really, really great things while he was junior warden. Now our junior warden is Phil Johnson. He's just learning the ropes right now, but he came to me just before I came down here and said, I have to tell you these 4 things before you get in there. So he's working hard at that right now too. So you elect your junior warden. The senior warden is sometimes referred to as the rector's warden. The senior warden is the only person that the rector gets to select on their own. Okay? So that's the only person I get to do by myself. You guys elect everybody else. Okay? Because that person is supposed to have my back. So right now, our senior warden has just stepped down. So if anybody wants to talk to him. All right.
It's appointed from somebody on the vestry, though, isn't it?
The senior warden?
Yes.
No, always by the priest in charge.
So you'll be looking for a new one.
So I'm looking for a new one right now. Yep. And like I said, that's the only thing I get to do by myself. The vestry does everything else, and you guys vote for everybody else. Okay? So Episcopal parishes basically function like congregational churches, with some diocesan framework. We operate within our individual selves, but we report to the diocese. Okay? The canons very smartly split the responsibilities between the rector and the vestry down the line. The priest teaches and worship responsibility, as I said. The vestry finances and property. But of course, the whole idea is that we're working together on all of these things. It's very tricky how they did that. My personal sense in the canons of the church, and let me say, the canons of the Episcopal Church are about 150 pages, paperback, normal size book. Let's compare that with the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic canons are the size of what we used to call an encyclopedia, a 30-volume encyclopedia.
The whole set?
So you remember
One book or the whole
encyclopedias?
set?
No, the canons are all of them. Yeah.
The whole
So-
set.
The whole set.
We really have tried to create a church where we're living with that three-legged stool, and that we're using some reason here, and we don't have to spell out everything word for word. That said, it's still too much. I mean, for some of us, but anyway. My personal belief is if you have to look something up in the canons about whose job it is to do something, you're already in deep trouble. I know that whenever I have to pull out that book and say, okay, whose job is it really to do this and what's supposed to happen, I know that we're already at a place we shouldn't be as a church. So that's the whole idea, is that we do everything together. In most dioceses, Charlie,
You said that you pick out, you don't have to be anybody to be on the vestry. You just put your name in if you
yeah,
want.
if you're a communicant in good standing, you can run for this.
Okay, there's junior warden the same way?
Yep,
How
exactly.
about the senior warden?
Senior warden, as long as you're a communicant in good standing,
Okay, so you can pick anybody out of the hat?
anybody.
Okay.
I hope I don't do it out of a hat. All right. So, in most dioceses, the rector picks the assistant clergy in a church. And that is, in most dioceses, not subject to approval of the vestry. But I will tell you, here at Grace St. Paul's, so we've just gone through this, we just chose an assistant. So I went out and looked for that person. I found the person, and then I took it to the vestry and said, so here's what I got. What do you think? So I run all of those kinds of decisions by the vestry, even though in theory I'm allowed to make that decision. And the vestry usually says something to me like, that's not our decision, you decide. But I want them to be involved in that process whenever it's possible. Okay? And I think it's crazy to not do that. Vestries are agents and legal representatives of a parish or a mission in all matters concerning the corporate property and the relations to its clergy. Okay? But control of the church and the parish buildings are assigned to the rector. So you see how it is impossible to do anything on your own. If the vestry is the legal representative of the church in all matters of property, but the rector has control of the property, then you see it's physically impossible to do anything without each other. And that's the wonderful thing about who we are and what we're trying to do there. Okay? A majority vote of the vestry or a rector can petition for help in resolving a dispute. A vestry can't remove a vicar or a rector in our diocese without her consent.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Steve,
Yep.
what's the definition of vicar again?
Vicar is the priest in charge of a mission church.
So like over in England, there's vicars
Yes.
everywhere.
So that's in America. But
Okay.
in England, there are no rectors. Everybody's a vicar. And it's different in England because you're talking about a piece of land. So it's not just the church you know, the vicar is the spiritual person for this entire region.
Okay.
So they're all called vicars. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay. So yeah, that gets really sticky there. We assume that the members of a parish know what is best for their community, and that's why we give them these positions.
You preceded that last line about removing vestry or vestry removing priest in charge.
Yep.
With the words "in this diocese."
Yeah.
But isn't that true in most every diocese of the PE, the PICUSA?
As far as I know, yes.
I think that's
As far as I know, right. So a bishop can't walk in and take me out of here, okay, in theory, unless I violate Title IV, okay, and there's some ethical or moral reason that happens. That's your decision, not the bishop's, okay? And that's really important to know, okay?
Removing a rector creates huge turmoil
Yeah,
in a church.
yeah,
Because I've been involved with that
sure does.
in Idaho Falls.
okay.
And we had a husband and wife who were both priests,
Mhm.
and they were both rectors.
Okay,
And the female half of that was abusive.
okay,
And I served on the vestry, and she wrote a letter which she forced her husband to read, directed at me.
right,
I left the church and went to, had a small mission church just down the street.
okay,
But they ended up, because of what they did to me, they recognized what they had done. They took a year sabbatical
okay,
and never came back.
never came back, okay.
But it was very painful.
It's so.
Not
painful.
just for me, but for the church.
It's so painful. But we have to have a mechanism for removing people,
Right.
obviously.
Yeah.
So it's really important that exists. It's even more difficult with a bishop. And I speak from personal experience there too. It's really a cumbersome process, but the process does exist and it does happen. But it's almost always for some sort of ethical or moral situation. So you see, we're all about shared and equal ministry. We're all about sharing in everything that we do. And the analogy that I make is to the Eucharist. It's what we do together. That's what we do. So that's how we govern ourselves. Okay? So let's move to the diocesan level and talk about the same thing. So like in the church, you have an annual meeting. At the diocese, you have annual convention. And this year at convention, we're going to be electing a bishop. And there are lay delegates and clergy that go to annual convention. You get a number of lay delegates based on the size of your church. And we vote on them at our annual meeting, and then those folks represent us at annual convention. So we have lay delegates and clergy. We're all in the same room at annual convention. We don't split into houses, but there are certain canonical things that we vote on that we have to vote by houses. And in this diocese, we just assume that nobody's going to lie and say they're a priest and whatever. So we just do that when necessary. Okay? The standing committee is like the vestry in church at the diocesan level. We elect our standing committee at annual convention, and again, it's half clergy and half lay people, and that's who works hand in hand with the bishop. In some dioceses, there is also another committee called a diocesan council, and that's in really big dioceses where it's too much work for the standing committee to do everything, and they split responsibilities between a diocesan council and a standing committee. In this diocese, when I got here, we had both. We had a diocesan council and a standing committee, And last year, we dissolved the diocesan council and gave it all to the standing committee. So that's up to the diocese. Okay. Good? So we talked a little bit about bishop selection and how that works. The open houses, okay, we did all that. Okay. We talked about a suffragan bishop. The other bishop name that you might hear is coadjutor. We love these crazy words. Huh? So a bishop coadjutor is a bishop that is serving with another bishop. So for example, if we elect our next bishop now, and she is learning the job, and there's some time before Bishop Kirk leaves, it's possible that we could consecrate her as bishop and leave Bishop Kirk in the job and have both of them work together for 6 months or a year or something for the other person to learn the ropes. We did that in the Diocese of Utah because the Diocese of Utah is very complicated because of all the financial stuff with the sale of St. Mark's Hospital. So it was very important that the next bishop get all that stuff. So anyway, that's how a coadjutor. That's not going to happen in this diocese. Shirley.
Oh, thank you. What is the total membership
Uh,
of Grace St. Paul?
Of Grace St. Paul's membership. We have 1,200 people in the books. Yep.
Wow.
Doesn't mean they all come to church.
That's right. Our average Sunday attendance is 300, and that's the number that I hang my hat on.
Okay.
Okay?
Both
Okay.
both services added together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. That's about right.
Okay? All right, so you got the diocese, how it's set up like the vestry, like at a church level, but we do the same thing. So bishop, standing committee, whole deal. Okay, so now the whole Episcopal Church, all right? What we used to call the national church. Don't call it the national church because our church goes way beyond America. We have churches in Mexico and the Philippines and in Europe. We'll talk about that next week, okay? Or maybe a little bit this week. So no bishop in the church can be consecrated without 3 other bishops laying their hands on the bishop, okay? To ensure that the diocese has approval of the larger church and a diocese doesn't go rogue on us and try to do something without that. Today, the election of a bishop in America must have approval of the majority of the diocese. So somebody gets elected bishop in I'm going to choose the right place here. In Bethlehem, in the Diocese of Bethlehem in Pennsylvania. All of the dioceses in the church have to vote on that, and a majority of them have to vote. So the people in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania pick their bishop, they have their bishop, it's all set. Then it has to go to the Episcopal Church level, and then the majority of dioceses have to approve that bishop. Why is that?
Who does that vote?
The same people,
So it's the annual convention
it's
of
the
each
annual
diocese.
convention people. Yep.
So it takes at least a year then
Yep.
for that approval.
No, they do it by proxy, they don't.
Oh,
they
by
don't
proxy.
have a meeting. Yep, so, but it usually does take a couple months. And the thought process behind that is that we don't have a diocese that tries to take over and do their own thing.
Okay.
And this became, this wasn't just abstract a couple years ago when the Diocese of South Carolina elected someone who had no intention of living into the canons of the Episcopal Church and really wanted to take the diocese out because of our stance on homosexuality, etc. And their goal was to remove the diocese from the communion. Well, we knew that, and so that bishop did not get approved, and they had to go get another bishop.
What percentage have to, is it a majority of other dioceses have to
vote in favor,
Yes. Yes, just a straight majority.
straight majority.
Yep. Okay. We have 113 dioceses right now in the Episcopal Church. And as I said, there are other places: Mexico, Haiti, the Philippines, the Dominican Republic, Honduras, Colombia, Ecuador, El Salvador, little pieces of Europe, and of course, Navajo land, which is its own country, supposedly.
So those are Episcopal churches, not part of,
Those are
not
all,
just generally part of the Anglican community.
those are in the Episcopal Church, not just the Anglican community. Those places are all in the Episcopal Church. So we have representatives at our general convention from all of those places. Do you guys know Dave Bailey? Did you?
No.
So that was before you?
Okay.
Okay. Charlie?
Yeah, why did they, you said they didn't, the Carolinas didn't want to be in the Episcopal Church anymore, is that?
Yeah, they were gonna take their
South Carolina.
marbles and go to the Anglican
believe
Communion
that.
in Africa.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so
They
they,
didn't like they
Yeah.
didn't even, they never got over women priests, to be perfectly honest.
No, no, they never.
okay, so they have a right, what do they vote in the, how do you get that? I'm not asking you to get that. I don't
No.
want- I like it,
Yeah.
No, but why, they just don't like the policy?
Yeah, they don't like the
And
theology.
then they have to get everybody in their,
Right, so what's happened in those cases is it hasn't really happened by a diocese.
Right.
Although there's been some attempt
It's okay.
to do that, nobody's been successful doing that. It's usually been individual churches, and an individual church votes by congregation to say, we don't want to be in the Episcopal Church anymore.
So that diocese had to come up with another bishop who was then accepted by
Right.
the church.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Karen was next, and then came back.
Okay, so I'm confused about, there's the Episcopal Church,
Yep,
and then there's the Anglican.
yes.
And sort of, how
Yeah.
do they relate to each other?
We haven't got to that yet. I'm gonna go to that at the end.
Oh, okay.
Next session?
No, this session.
Oh, today.
Okay, but they're separate, though, they're separate.
The Episcopal Church is one part of the Anglican Communion.
Oh, I see,
It's
okay.
one section,
Oh,
okay?
all right.
The Anglican Communion is the whole world. So what I'm saying is all these dioceses that I just listed,
Yeah.
other than in America, they're all in the Episcopal Church.
Right.
Okay? The Anglican Communion is the whole communion in the whole world. And I'll just jump to it. What holds us together is what we call bonds of affection.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Can you say that again?
Bonds of affection. Okay? So, for example, the Archbishop of Canterbury is the titular head of the entire Anglican Communion. But we don't, whatever the Archbishop of Canterbury says, we don't have to pay any attention to him.
Okay.
Because we are the Episcopal Church and we make our own decisions and we govern ourselves. We like to hear from him. It's wonderful to know what he's thinking, but he can't tell us what to do. Because first of all, we don't make decisions except with lay people and all of that. So I'll fill that in when we get there.
Okay.
Because there are groups that hold us together within the Anglican Communion, and we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Okay? Yes.
When a church decides they don't want to be Episcopals anymore, there's
Yeah.
more than just voting out, because the church itself, the property is all owned by the Episcopal
Thank
Church.
you.
So they have
Thank
to
you.
pay, they have to buy the church back or something?
Thank you. So that's a really good point. And did we talk about the churches in Virginia?